Me thank you for being here, those of you who are here. And I suspect I should immediately give a response to the letter that was sent by President Granger to the chairman of the Elections Commission yesterday. Many people called me and asked what my views were. And I said to them, I'll address it at today's press conference. But most people share with me the collective disappointment we all have with the letter. In fact, I believe the letter is intended to fool Guyanese once more into believing that somehow the president is taking the issue forward, taking responsibility as president of Guyana, but when, on the other hand, he himself is lending to the confusion and to the process of the delay. So I saw Harman's letter, and we probably need to go through the history of this issue a bit. You recall that the two letters that were sent on February 25th from President Granger, both dated February 25th, and their contents were contradictory. So on one, President Granger said, start the preparations for elections, and another letter sent on the same day to the same chairman of GCOM. He said that he wants to consult on their readiness. Then Vincent Alexander pointed out that the second letter superseded the first. So subsequent to that, we raised a number of issues, and I myself pointed this out in GCOM to the president. And then the president met with GCOM again. So at that meeting, we thought the president will ask the chairman of GCOM, when he invited them, are you ready for the elections? And you have to be ready to give some directions. What happened there was a charade. 3 commissioners representing the opposition went to the meeting. They went prepared. They had a proposal as to how we could have elections latest by April 30th, as we had proposed. They refused to accept that proposal. The president then proceeded to have the members of his cabinet, the extensive group that met the commissioners, each make a presentation emphasizing to the GCOM the need for house-to-house registration and that the list was bloated. So they didn't go there asking to be informed by GCOM. The people didn't go, they didn't convene the meeting for that purpose. They convened that meeting at the office of the president with GCOM to put pressure on GCOM to go down this route. And they're for house to house. The president emerged from that meeting and he said that the list is bloated. Suddenly, this is the same list that we use for local government elections that's still valid and suddenly has become bloated. So then the president yesterday wrote, and can you imagine that meeting took place last Friday? And the president took a whole week nearly to send a letter yesterday which says to the commissioners, I now request that the commission present me with a work program in the shortest possible time. I emphasize that this is essential to inform me of the commission's readiness to deliver credible elections in Guyana. Now, you need a whole week to tell the GCOM that you need a program from them, your plans and programs and financial needs, 1 week after you met with them. Clearly, if this is not part of the president's strategy to delay the elections, then nothing is. It's just, it makes all that we're saying about the president and him trying to slow down the elections true. Just imagine you meet with all the commissioners. You can easily say to them, I want your plans now. You know, tell me what your financial needs are, and they are known to everyone. They've been known for the last 3 months what they need. And then you wait after they leave your meeting, and 1 week later, write them about their financial needs and submission of the program. We have a president who is complicit with the 3 commissioners who represent him and a unilaterally appointed chairman in the process of delaying the elections. This is a weak president who subjects the Constitution and his responsibility now to the work program of GCOM that he himself has influenced. So that is the crux of the matter. And now the Constitution and the role of the president to call elections are now subjected to a work program developed by GCOM that the president and his not cabinet, but his ministers have now influenced. That is the reality of this situation there. The second issue I wanted to deal with was what took place yesterday. So we're very pleased that in presenting her credentials, the U.S. ambassador spoke about the U.S. continuing to encourage genuinely free and fair elections, freedom of speech and assembly, multi-party representation, and a constitutional judiciary process. We're quite pleased about this, as we were about other statements that emanated from different sources. I saw the British High Commissioner did an interview in which he said the 3 months clock is ticking, it hasn't been stayed, etc. But to my surprise, I saw the president in his response saying that something to the effect that we have to have mutual non-interference in each other's domestic affairs, internal affairs. So I was wondering, and I do have the transcript which I read last week, and I will now read again here today, but I was wondering where the president, why he didn't say that in 2014 when he called for international sanctions against Guyana if we did not have elections or the reconvening of the parliament after the prorogation to face the no confidence motion in 2014. He called for sanctions against Guyana. And today he is saying when the external forces say that you have to have elections, you have to respect the Constitution, we must have genuinely free and fair elections. Today he is lecturing about the mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs. So it would be wise for people across Guyana to read what the president has said when he called for sanctions. I would urge the president also to look at the African Union Constitutive Act. And in there, they have a new principle. The principle is of non-indifference, as opposed to non-interference in the domestic affairs of nation states or member states. That is non-indifference, and they define that by saying when there is a serious threat to legitimate order, that the world and the African Union in its will not have an indifferent approach when there is a threat to legitimate order. And we all recognize that in Guyana there is a threat to legitimate order, that the government will become unconstitutional in the shortest possible while, by March 21st, and we will go into unconstitutional rule. The third issue I wanted to address today was the issue that is currently being debated. I see it in the newspapers, etc. And this has to do with elections and the charade that is going on in the courts now. And let me make it clear. No amount of foreign representation that the government will pay for from taxpayers' money, and that in itself is a huge problem, and they will have to account for it, because the government should not be paying any lawyer now from taxpayers' resources. They should not be doing this. But they are doing this, and they brought in some foreign representation. But how will you get past the Constitution of Guyana and the ruling of the Chief Justice that has been so profound and fully explained? And I would wish that all Guyanese will just go to the elaboration of the Chief Justice's ruling, and you will see that for every single argument that is being made now, she struck them down with the most formidable of reasoning. And so, for example, this whole thing about the refashioning of the 34-31 needed to pass a no-confidence motion. The Chief Justice made it clear that only in an even number, like the case that was cited in Vanuatu, an even number house, will you have a formula of the nature that is being proposed by the government. That is rounding up plus one. She explained in our parliament that to pass a bill or an ordinary piece of legislation, you just needed the majority of the members present on that sitting. So assuming that there are 40 members who go to parliament on that day, if you get 21 votes, then you can pass the bill. So it's only those members who are sitting. She says in the case of a no confidence motion, the difference is that you have to get the majority of all of the members of the National Assembly. That is the 65 members. So you have to get at least 33 and more. So assuming, for example, that APNU had stayed away totally, we would have only gotten 32 votes, and that would not have been enough to pass the no confidence motion, had they stayed away totally, not attended the sitting, none of their members of parliament, because you need 33 votes to pass a no confidence motion. Other issues in the parliament can be passed by what is termed, well, simple majority, or a majority of those present in that sitting. How do you get past that argument? How do you, I would like to see what kind of creativity will be used to get past that argument, because it's factual, it's reason, it's logical, and it was the denominator that mattered. In one case, it is of those who attend that sitting, and then in a no confidence motion, it's a case of all of the members of the National Assembly, a majority of all of the members. It's simple as that. On the dual citizenship, the Chief Justice went into a lengthy explanation, and she pointed out how they want to change the rules after the game is lost. How they benefited from Charan Das's vote, which has been illegal. She ruled that dual citizens should not be in our parliament, but they put Charan Das there. They benefited from the votes. And although she ruled that dual citizenship is not contemplated in our constitution, she did not invalidate the vote, because Article 165(2) of our constitution is quite clear on the matter. 165(2) in a nutshell simply says that even if someone is there illegally in the parliament, it preserves the proceedings of the parliament. 165(2) of the Constitution preserves what took place in Parliament on that day. And so which court or what argument are they going to use? I've not heard them address 165(2). Which court could change 165(2)? And then in terms of the delay and who extends the life of the government, clearly you can't use the courts to supplant the legislature, because the Constitution is clear. Only the legislators can vote to extend the life of the government. 2/3 support of the legislators. So not the court or anyone else, only the legislature. And that if the courts try to do that, they will be putting themselves above the Constitution. And they're a creature of the Constitution. And as Anil Nandalal pointed out, the doctrine of the separation of powers. And then suddenly, so the timeline, I don't see how the timeline could be extended. And then suddenly, I see this whole issue of finances appearing now. Suddenly, they're arguing, oh, we need to stay on in power, because GCOM will not have enough money, and you may need us in the future to give GCOM money. So let us address this issue. Anil Nandalal dealt with it brilliantly when he addressed the issue of access to the contingency fund. But do they need the contingency fund? They don't need the contingency fund. GCOM has twice the amount of money now it needs to hold the elections. GCOM pointed out that it needed in their budget just over $2 billion to hold these elections. That is a budget that they had given to the commissioners. That's over $2 billion. In the budget debate, they asked as a constitutional agency protected by Article 222, they asked for much more. The Minister of Finance in the Parliament says, Mr. Chairman, the sum of $5,371,061,061 is given as a lump sum to GCOM to use as it sees fit and as it prioritizes. GCOM has $5.3 billion. The FMA says the appropriation of a constitutional agency approved by the National Assembly shall be disbursed as a lump sum by the end of the month following the month in which the appropriation is approved. So if it is approved, the appropriation was approved in December, they should have $5.3 billion in their account now. If it was approved in January, when the president assented to the appropriation bill, by end February, GCOM should have, according to this law, $5.3 billion in their account to use as they see fit and as they prioritize. So GCOM has more than enough money now, twice as much money as it needs to conduct the elections. Forget resort to even the contingency fund. and that is always available should they do that. But I believe that the president persists with this issue in spite of all the explanations given, because they want to open up a new front in the court now to say, oh, we need to stay there because GCOM may need money in the future. They don't need to be there for GCOM to have enough money to deal with this issue. So these are the key issues before the court. The nonsensical argument, and whoever they bring from the region, they can pay the highest price lawyers from anywhere in the world to make those arguments, and it wouldn't change the reality of 33 versus 32. And the dual citizenship argument, how do they overcome Article 165.2 of our Constitution? And 3, how do you extend, the court would extend the timeline of the government? Only the legislature can do it. And 4, they have enough money. Where are these arguments leading us? We're just delaying everything. The court is being used to delay the elections. So a first set of issues that I wanted to deal with is I've been asked about the letters written to international organizations. And so we have written, Gail Tischer has written on my behalf to the Commonwealth, to the Organization of American States, and to CARICOM. And in all 3 cases, we are requesting that these agencies not recognize the government of Guyana after March 21st. There are other issues we've raised in the letter. We gave them a detailed briefing as to how the government has deliberately been slowing down the process of complying with the Constitution, how they've acted in bad faith throughout, even at the engagements we've had. And we brought the international organizations up to speed on those things. And we requested non-recognition of the government. 2, I received a call from President Carter, and I spoke with him about what is taking place in Guyana now. And he said he would try to get on to President Granger. I do not know if he succeeded, but at some future time, I will inform you, and this happened last week. And at some point in time, I will brief you if the discussions continue in that we've had. I did not mention it last week because I wanted to give enough time for President Carter to get in touch with President Granger. I also, last week, or earlier this week, we met, myself, Irfan Ali, and Juan Edghill. We met with President Moreno from the Inter-American Development Bank. The IDB has been an important partner for us. And at that meeting, I pointed out about several issues that we have with how the IDB funds were being used. I told him that there are 2 contracts that we believe that there have been massive corruption in, that are funded by the Inter-American Development Bank, and that we'll have full-fledged investigations of. The contracts are the one for meters at GPL, at which one contract was awarded at a price of over $1 billion above the next closest bidder. And recently, on January 2nd, this is long after the cabinet had been resigned, or stood resigned as ruled by the Chief Justice. And contrary to the explanatory memorandum that showed clearly, explanatory memorandum to the bill that amended the Constitution to insert 106, that the government should stay in office for the 3 months after the passage of the no confidence motion only for one purpose, which is holding elections, that they have been doing other things, including awarding a multi-billion-dollar contract, a multi-billion dollars contract. So I pointed this out, and I pointed out that is a pattern, that in this case too, the local guys were disqualified, as in the first case with partnership, and another company got the contract about $1 billion above the price of the local company in partnership with a foreign company. $1 billion in both cases, more than what we should really have paid in both cases. I pointed out also that in GPL, where both of these IDB contracts were used, that the board, there has been no functioning board for over a year now, and we believe that this is deliberate because it allows the minister and others to have special undue influence. They'd have undue influence over the tendering there. So we pointed this out to President Moreno, and we said that after the elections, we will have a full-fledged investigation into these two contracts, because we believe they're extremely corrupt, and one would wonder why they're not naming the board to GPL. Over a year has been passed, and you don't have a functioning board. This is unbelievable, and it's taking place right before our nose. We pointed out that for hinterland housing and the home improvement program, that the APNU has been using IDB funds to hand out at their party events, not government events, breaching almost all of the rules about accountability for use of the money, etc. And we have flyers. I said, I promise him that I will send him the detail, because he did not know a lot of these things. It seems as though he's not being fully briefed by the local office. And and so I said, I'll send him the flyers where there are PNC events that are giving out money from an IDB loan, at which PNC events. And it's largely to their friends and family. Not most ordinary Guyanese will not get that. We pointed out that under the GRIF, the Norwegian, that the energy mix study, we did not agree with it. We believe that the hydropower should have been built. We pointed out to President Moreno about the independent study that was done by Norway after the government change, and they claimed that it was corruption, and the study said that the Amila Hydro is the best option forward for Guyana. This was a study paid for by Norway, and an independent company did it. And that the government totally ignored that, and they've gone to some smaller scale things like solar, which cannot be base load, and that even the solar projects that they set aside in the budget, they have not been tendering. People close to the companies, the PNC, are getting the contracts. So we pointed that out to the president of the IDB, and we also pointed out that there will be no recognition of the government or any disbursement to them after March 21st. So we had an extensive meeting with the president of the Inter-American Development Bank. I've also indicated that we will write to Norway. You'd recall that some years ago, Ramjatan, when we were launching the LCDS and the carbon program, the $250 million US, that Ramjatan and a few others wrote to Norway to say, do not disburse any money to Guyana. Don't give them any money. IDB ignored it because at that time the government was legal, constitutional, we had all of the safeguards in, etc. Nearly 200 million came to Guyana. And almost all of this money has been at their disposal. 10.7 million for, I think 10.2 million for the land titling activity, 17 million US dollars set aside for hinterland upgrading, telecommunication and linkages, etc. 80 million set aside for the Amila Hydro. They've had the money there all the time. Money that they try to oppose coming to Ghana and that they've been using. So now that the government will become illegal from March 21st, we'll write Norway to say that on the GRIF projects, no disbursement should take place on the GRIF projects, because they've been using money that they didn't earn, that they opposed coming to Ghana. We've been patriots, we've been pushing them to use the money faster for land titling, etc., and for hinterland upgrading of telecommunication. They have not done so, but now we will write them. We are very, very concerned about what the level of corruption. We heard that in the arrival terminal at the airport alone, there were 1,400 defects that were identified, and that the government still insisted on taking over that terminal. That will be that will be a subject of a large-scale investigation. What they took, the nature of the project that we had, a project that would have had a large runway, 8 air bridges to accommodate some of the biggest aircrafts around the world, and entirely modern, new. The old terminal pulled down completely and a modern terminal built right across. They have now changed it into a rehabilitation project. And from what I heard, it's even getting worse now in this period as they're grabbing. At the tender board, I saw somebody got caught tampering with the documents, the video footage. But there are many others in the senior leadership of the tender board who will never be caught on the video footage, who've been doing this routinely. They're picking the evaluators for certain types of projects and for certain contractors. They're handpicking who the evaluators would be. It's not done randomly anymore, handpicking them, so they will get a particular result. 2, they're taking the documents that are submitted to the tender board in the opening, and the documents go back to the contractors to alter. It's unbelievable. They only found this one, which was recently. But this has been done routinely. Imagine you put your document, it's sealed. It goes into the box. They open it at the central tender board, NPTAB. And then the contractors get back, their preferred ones, get back their documents to adjust it, to adjust the documents to come back in. And then they put it back in because they can't do much. Normally it's signed on. So they have to give them back the original to adjust. This is what's happening routinely, apart from the fact that now it's open season for contracts that would all be illegal because they can't sign any contract after March 21st. So this is a routine thing. You just seen the tip of the iceberg with the person who got caught a few days ago tampering with the documents on video camera in there. It's a cesspool. This is happening for multi-billion dollars contracts. And watch the pattern. A few people are getting all the big ones, getting these big, huge contracts. And most people are not getting anything else. Most ordinary Guyanese. So we will have to deal with that issue too. I saw the thing about the comments at Babujan. At Babujan, we made it clear that this government would be illegal, and we want the people of Guyana to treat them as illegal. And I said that when Granger comes and when Nagamutu comes there, that people should chase them out because they would be illegal. They would be squatting on power. Can't come to our communities, refuse to abide by the will of the people, the Constitution of Guyana, and expect us to welcome you with garlands. That's what they want, garlands for violating the rule of law and the Constitution. Now note I said Granger and Nagamutu, and I identified them by names, and ministers. That's what we have, not ordinary people. So when I saw Barbara Pilgrim writing the Ethnic Relations Commission, they should only go to the transcript of what I said, who I identified. And I'm repeating it. When the ministers come, or Granger or Nagamutu, you have to do that. Chase them out of the communities right across Guyana, because they would be illegal, unconstitutional. We can't roll out a red carpet or sprinkle perfume on them, or burn incense and welcome them with open arms, if that's what they want, after violating the Constitution and hanging on to power just for the perks and privileges. People of Guyana, that's what they have to do. And so this has nothing to do with other people. And this brings me to another point, that how do we treat ordinary people who may work with the government, whose lives depend on the government after the 21st of March? Because if we insist on what we should really insist on, that is the shutdown of the entire government, then what will happen to our public servants, our teachers, our nurses, our doctors, our policemen, our soldiers, who have to be paid by the Treasury? And therefore, that is why we are not going to do, I made this clear when I went into Parliament the first time. I said, we will be the type of opposition that will seek to bring benefits to people, not hardships to them. That we are not going to do anything to harm your livelihood and well-being. Like when the US government recently had a shutdown, many people did not receive, ordinary people did not receive their salaries. Millions of them, 20-something million of them, who are working for government. But we can't do that in Guyana. We can't do that to public servants, etc., or the other groups that I mentioned. So we expect, we will insist that the hospitals keep functioning, and the police and the army and our public servants have an income at the end of the month, those who rely on public service, etc. But we will target the few of them who are the transgressors. We will target the ministers, and we'll target the president, and we'll target the prime minister, not with violence, because we don't believe in violence, but we'll target them with protests and with that they believe they can stay there with impunity, with legal action, and after the government changes, we will hold them responsible for any expenditure they have made in this period on themselves, any trip, etc. They'll have to pay back for all of those things, because we need them to understand that you can't stay with impunity to enjoy privileges in violation of the Constitution. So we will limit who we target, because it's not the public servants who are breaching the Constitution. It is Granger and his cabal of ministers who want to hang on to power for themselves, for their privilege and perks, and for the corruption you see. And therefore, it would be unfair to target other groups of people. So they will be targeted with protests, a whole range of action. But we're not going to be violent. That is clear as daylight. So many people, we will, as we approach the 21st, next week I will outline to you, and you will see what are some of the additional measures we intend to put in place after March 21st. But I want, because I've had a lot of calls from public officials who are uneasy, is whether they will be paid and all of that. The crisis will affect them getting their salaries, etc. at the end of the month. They have nothing to fear. The ones in the public service who have things to fear are the ones who are complicit with this government in this thievery that's going on. And so the public servants, the Secretary to the Treasury, have to ensure that outside of some basic expenditure for the routine functioning of the government, that the ministers must not be paid. They cannot be paid, and nothing associated with the ministers, none of the privileges, etc., that they are funded, and that no contract be issued in that period because it would be illegal. And any person who collaborates with the administration in this regard, they will face the consequences too. So these are some of the matters that I wanted to deal with today. So thank you very much.
The Commonwealth, OAS, and CARICOM as to what the treatment of the government is going to be after March 21?
No, but we have acknowledgement of the letters. So we'll be following up. I had called the Secretary General of the of CARICOM, and I plan to call the others later. I spoke already to the Secretary General.
What about the diplomatic? I know you mentioned before you would have written
Well, I have several meetings over the course of the next few days. So tomorrow I'm meeting with some members of the diplomatic community again.
Doc, as a former president, and given the problems that we have with race relations in Guyana, how do you see yourself assisting to make things better, given your experience as the highest office holder in the land?
Wendell, this is not about race. This is not even about our politics. This is about a government that we elected, put in place, and that refuses to abide by the rule of law, a ruling of the court, and by our Constitution. And that is making all sorts of excuses not to fulfill its constitutional role, which is to comply with the Constitution and hold elections. I'm arguing that all the people of Guyana, regardless of your race or your politics, must want a government that respects our Constitution and the laws of our country. How do you or any other Guyanese, I mean you in a collective sense, I mean Guyanese, bring up our children in a country where our government is the biggest, I don't want to say the criminal, but they breach the largest breacher of our laws, in fact the Constitution, when they expect us to comply with the laws of Guyana. What consequences are there? If a person drives down the road here and they get into an accident, there are consequences for that person. Could be charged, could go to the court, might face a fine, might even face jail term. Here we have a government, an entire government, refusing to abide by a ruling of the court and the Constitution, and they think they can do it without consequences and in impunity. This must offend all of us as decent people, all Guyanese, and there are decent people in APNU, in PPP, and there are decent people among every race of people in Guyana, all Guyanese. They're decent people. So it must offend our sense of decency and love for this country and about what kind of society we want to bring up our children in or build in Guyana. It must be a society built around the Constitution and rule of law. And so I even saw them using some comment I made in 2006 to say I had said that it basically okayed GCOM acting in a manner that is totally where GCOM would have set the date basically for the elections. That is the implication. So if you look at the transcript of it, I was speaking about the verification of the list. Nothing had to do with timeline for elections. That's one. About verification procedure, because there were arguments about biometrics or no biometrics. And eventually GCOM they decided on biometrics, and they decided on testing, sending the list abroad to scan the list for duplication. But that had to be a function of GCOM. And until now they do that, so you can't have duplication when they thumbprint. So that was a separate matter. But they're so desperate, they're using that as in a comparable sense. Two, I did not abdicate my responsibility as president. I named the date for the elections. And three, I did not face a no confidence vote where the Constitution imposed a 3-month deadline on holding elections, or that my cabinet was stood to resign by the passage of that motion. And yet that's what they're saying as a new excuse. Oh, Jagdeo did something in the past. So this is not about race, Wendell. This is not about even our politics. This is about a government that believes it can continue doing what it wants to do. The only reason they're out on the ground now, coming to communities, once again, and for that reason alone, people should chase out these ministers, because they neglected them for 4 years. Suddenly they're concerned about giving you a birth certificate anymore, or an application form for a house lot. Never mind, they have not developed a single new house lot. But you're getting application forms now like crazy to fill up. It's like the promises of 2015. Every place they go, here, take an application form, you get it. They have not developed a single new housing scheme, not one new house lot in 4 years in government. Not in 4 years, but it's a new set of promises. Suddenly, they're back on the ground to do that, to mislead people once again. For that reason alone, people should chase them off. And the ministers I'm talking, in a very non-violent fashion.
Right, I wanted to talk about that. When you say chase off, it suggests some kind of a confrontation. How do we envision chasing off?
I say, why are you here now? Where were you, Wendell, or where were you, Harman, in the last 4 years? Where were you when you were busy giving a contract to Larry Singh for $300 and something million? He collected $360 million, or not 360, over 300 million, for renting you a house that wasn't tendered, and you were chasing out us as vendors on the street. Where were you when we needed house lots? Why you only need us now? Are we a vote bank? What if you had not faced the no confidence motion, would you have been here? And why don't you comply with the Constitution? You're illegal. I don't want to listen to you. Get out of here. That's how I see it. Role play enough? I can tell you that's how I see it. We can role play it, you know?
Mr. Jagdeo, Marcel Thomas from the South.
Yes.
Your telephone call with President Carter last week. Could you say what was said to you about the political...
Marcel? Right.
And what did you say in return?
I tried to avoid that. I just mentioned the meeting took place, and I said a little later I want to give details of the conversation. I did not mention it last week that we had a conversation, because President Carter said to me he was trying to get on to President Granger. And I did not want to, just soon as I receive a call to go in the media and say, oh, I just talked to President Carter. So give him enough time for that. I thought it's necessary for Guyanese to know that I received a call and I spoke with him. I prefer to keep a little quiet on the content at this point in time until I hear back from him as to whether he has spoken to President Granger.
And my other question is,
Who will, by the way, be Mr. Granger from the 21st.
yes, you're asking or expecting an international role in Guyana's affairs from the 21st. How do you expect the international community to respond to that when your own party will have delivered a feral blast to the U.S. about interfering in Guyana's politics? Is that something without standard?
So I dealt with that a little bit earlier when you were not here. I pointed out that we will do exactly what President Granger argued for in 2014. The sanctions that he asked for, we agree with his characterization at that time, but brought forward to a 2019 context that Guyana would become a pariah state and that it requires sanction to get the government to move. So I've dealt with that. I've also dealt with this issue of non-interference in the internal affairs of the country versus the non-indifference concept. When threat, the legitimate order is under threat, which is democracy. And so if I remember correctly, it was not the concern about the statement about local government elections that triggered what may seem a harsh response from the government at that time. It was the personal comments in relation to President Ramatar. And that we take strongly. Whilst I will support an international issue, the international community has always been involved in Guyana on the democracy front. From the involvement of President Carter, even President Bush at that time, and throughout, we have involved the international community. They've supported GCOM. Many of our democracy programs have been funded by USAID and the Canadians and the others. They've supported the parliament, etc. UNDP has been involved. They have supported placing advisors within GCOM, paid for advisors. They have supported the presence of international organizations to monitor elections. So the international community has always been integrally involved in the democratic processes in Guyana. So urging them to be involved now is nothing new. And so that was the thing I think that caused it, but not about a statement asking the government of Guyana to comply with the Constitution and the law.
So you're saying that Ambassador Hart at that time had gotten personal with it?
I believe, if my recollection of the issue is right, there were some comments made. But remember, I was out of government at that time. I was somewhere in Africa at that time, enjoying life.
There seems
They have to come back to this, please. Here.
There seems to be, from the amount of reporters here today, some kind of a fallout as a result of a remark you made last week when you were asked a question. And then there's also an additional talk of maybe a further boycotting of you and your position if some kind of substantial update is not given as it relates to the academics of your not presidential candidate. I'm just wondering, what are your takes on the two of those things?
I didn't hear the second one because if then the reporters should have boycotted President Granger a long time. They shouldn't even go to his meetings because he refuses to even hold press conferences. They should have done this for ages. If what you said is true, then they should have done that. I am hoping that where actual threats were made to reporters and Congress Place, that they would boycott any meeting that is held at Congress Place, where actual threats were made to reporters. And I don't recall making any threat to any reporter. But to say that if the presidential candidate doesn't answer a question, you will boycott him?
But not him.
Right, boycott me because the presidential candidate doesn't answer a question. That looks like the Chronicle leading that. That must be the Chronicle. It can't be the other news outfits. It must be the Chronicle that will boycott us. And the Chronicle here or there, it's the same thing. Whether they come or not, the Chronicle will still not be balanced.
Would you like to walk back any of the comments you made last week?
No, I think it was an exchange, and I did not say anything about the person. I thought the question in a particular way, but not the person. And it's quite clear. You go back and look at the tape itself, and you will see. And as I said before, after that happened, the press conference went on.
Do you believe that you have a track record of being abusive to the press?
Oh, really? No, I don't believe that.
Press freedom?
I have press freedom has flourished in my period as president. Flourished in Guyana. As more stations were open. In fact, I was criticized for even the radio stations that were given out. And you remember one time they said, I give it out only to PPP persons. And when we look at the ethnic breakdown, you had more Afro-Guyanese who got licenses than Indo-Guyanese in the radio licenses. And so in the 12 and a half years I was president, press freedom flourished in Guyana. Thank you very much.